Questions, anyone? Yes, Larry.
Worst experiences.
Oh, there's so many. Everyone, the year Emily and I did it was pouring rain. It was really difficult. Honestly, I wouldn't have made it through had I not. We were much younger. I had spent a ton of money that I didn't have to get over there, and so there's no way I was not going to finish. But I made a really, you get into the moment, you start making kind of stupid decisions. So I got over there, and half my stuff, I put my crank and some of my other parts into a separate bag. It didn't make it over there on the same plane with me. I ended up buying replacement parts. The bag ended up showing up. But in the sort of the heat of the moment, I didn't. My saddle was way too low, and I didn't realize it for a couple hundred miles. And also it was pouring rain, so I didn't drink because who needs to drink? I wasn't thirsty. I was wet and cold. So I ended up getting horrible cramps. Those two things, my legs were hurting in ways that I never thought possible. I mean, it was just excruciating pain. But I was like, I have to get through this thing. And I finally realized I raised my saddle. I started to drink, and I finished in time. I think 89 hours. 30 minutes or something like that. So it's those sort of things where, had my saddle been the right height from the get-go, had I been drinking the entire time, I would have been completely fine. So, everyone has a story like that. The reason why you do all the qualifying rides is, hopefully you kind of work out all those kinks, so by the time you're up to the really long distance stuff, you know for sure, raise your damn saddle.
The one addendum to that, in terms of kind of the silly things that you think you would be smart enough to not make this mistake, like Jake said, it was cold and raining the whole time, and my bike was getting noisier and noisier, and grinding more and more. And finally, I kept thinking, well, I should really go ask somebody for some chain lube at one of the controls. I'll do the next one. Finally, I got around to going to the mechanic's tent and asking for some chain lube, and they had this jar of this sticky red stuff that they had like a toothbrush or a paintbrush, and they just sort of slathered it all over everything. And of course, they were all very excited and had to before they could give me my chain lube, they all had to call over everybody else to come and look at this crazy person with the fixed gear. But I got back on the road and I was like, it's so much easier to pedal now. And so, what do you know? When you ride hundreds of miles in the pouring rain, it helps when you put some new chain lube on there from time to time. And of course I knew that, but I don't know how long I was going, grinding away unnecessarily until I finally went and got some chain lube, and then it magically got better.
More questions?
What's the best thing to eat?
Anything you can. Whatever tastes good, whatever you can get down. There are 6,500 riders. There's probably 1,300 opinions on that. 7,000 opinions on that.
The trick is eat a lot. Basically not stop eating, because a lot of people, that's their biggest problem. They think they have to, they just forget to eat, or they think they only want to eat one particular thing. They go out there and they only want to use Perpetuum, and then if their stomach starts turning south in Perpetuum, and they don't kind of figure it out.
Eat early and eat often.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, you have to listen to your body the entire time and think to yourself, what do I need right now? Because sometimes it's a slice of pizza, and sometimes it's a milkshake, and sometimes it's, just something salty.
Another way to think of it to me is, what can I possibly cram down right now? And if it's something that if you can get it to go down, then eat it.
What's a reasonable amount of time to figure after the ride's done before you're ready to pack it up and come home? For
a PBP or for?
Yeah.
I mean,
I think we packed our bikes the next day.
I mean, they have these, for those, there was travel agents, one travel agent that pretty much handles all of American flights and hotels and all this. You don't have to use them, but they do kind of simplify things. So if you're going to take one of the flights they recommend, if you have to get back for a job, you don't have a whole lot of choices. You're going to be off, unless you're in great shape and you're really doing several 1,200 Ks a year, you're probably going to be off the bike for a week or two. We're only doing short recover rides. It took me a long time before I was back up to doing more than just commuting.
I will say there was one time I did 1,000 K with one other person. There were only two of us on the ride, and he had planned a flight home. The cutoff time was 7 a.m. and he had planned a flight home for later that day. And he was supposed to coach his kids hockey that night. What an idiot! Well, and I think he was not expecting that we would be right up against the time limit on this ride, which turned out to be a harder ride than he expected. And he really regretted cutting it quite that close. But I think by the next day you're probably at least competent to pack up your bike and do what you have to do.
Although this person, he's out of Kansas City region. I recently did the math. Just in random events in the U.S., that one rider has accumulated more than 600 days of his life on random events. If you have all those finishing times, so and he's been doing this. I think he started a couple years earlier than we did. So he probably started in 2004, 2005. So, yeah.
What portion of the time in the PBP were you on somebody's wheel versus breaking the wind yourself? It's such a big variance. When I did it, in my full almost 90 hours, I got about maybe 4 hours of sleep. But there's so many people on the ride that I think there was only one point where I didn't see someone else. Before closer or after.
That's definitely it. Particularly now that there's 6,000 runners, particularly at night. There was never the whole night, that you didn't see a red light in front of you. So you can very rarely get lost because it's
And if you want to draft,
you pick up people as you go along. The Danes, they travel in packs.
the Germans.
Huge groups. And the other thing is, in France, the drivers are much more patient. So you get in one of these groups with the Danes, and you just kept going. I mean, it didn't matter, the cars would get off the road. So it depends on, and then as, was it Harriet, you said about some of the people that you rode really fast between a couple of checkpoints, that happens too. Somebody will go by you and just grab onto his or her wheel, and that happened to me. And I've never had so much fun. He couldn't speak English and I couldn't speak French, but we just had the best fun, and I was exhausted after I was died when I got there, but I needed to make up at the time. So you rarely are by yourself, and you can just pick and choose when you're going to ride with other people, or somebody will come up and hang on your wheel for a while. So they're almost, and now it's 6,000 riders. I can't imagine what it's like now.
I think people who are comfortable with drafting, you'll always have somebody to draft off of, and if you're not comfortable, you can ride on your own and it's fine.
Sure. The one thing to really understand, why you ride PBP, especially this day and age, you are on a ride with, so many thousands of people. Almost every country on earth is represented by at least a couple riders. Some countries have huge contingents, some just have a few. Places, Philippines, where I wouldn't think there'd be a whole lot of long distance riding, they have riders out there. So, it's an international sport that is like no other. And that's it's so fun riding with all these people from different cultures, but you have this connection because you've all done the same qualifying rides, you've all spent a lot of time on bikes. It's really unifying. It's an amazing experience, and nothing comes close that I've ever done.
Have you done other 1,200 Ks? How do they compare to PBP?
They're really different. I mean, the big thing is that at PBP, there's, first of all, so many people, and other 1,200 Ks, the last year that BMB was run, I think it had 100 and some, and other 1,200 Ks domestically are more like 15 to 50 people, kind of in that range, and 1,000 Ks I mean, 1,000K is not very different distance-wise, but they tend to be a smaller scale event, so those are more likely to be 10, 20, 30 people. So that's a big difference. I mean, a lot of other 1,200Ks or 1,000Ks, the stops will be gas stations or just a snack full of tables, and it's completely different scale than like getting to an entire gigantic high school that's been completely taken over, and the entire field is set up with just bike parking. And just to walk from where you have to park your bike to where the cafeteria is like a distance, because the place has to be so big to support 6,000 people. So that's one thing that's really, really makes the difference.
You mentioned a couple of times BMB. Why did that stop?
Jennifer Wise, who had taken over, she and Pierce did it for, I don't
10
know,
years or something.
10 years, something like that. She, it's a much more difficult ride to support because she limited the field to 75 people, even on the, and it was spread out from Boston to a suburb of Montreal with that. And so, logistically, to put it on was very difficult. I mean, a lot of us helped and volunteered. I think she decided she was tired of it.
You can actually still do it as a.
And no one's taken it over, unfortunately.
Yeah, there's another type of riding that Arusa provides called permanents. And these are similar rules to Brevet's, only you negotiate when you're going to do it. You can do it anytime. You discuss it with the permanent owner. You're usually the only person who's out there doing it at that time. So it's a little bit more informal, a little more ad hoc. And B&B is a permanent, so there's been people here who have done it just sort of on their own as a perm. So they all have
Follow-up question. Who did the first BMB?
Charlie Lynn.
Charlie Lynn.
Yeah. Who I believe is
It was
also
a
the
training ride for PBP, because the first couple of times that America, well, I can't remember exactly the dates, but, because PBP is the oldest organized bike event in the world. But in the early days, the Americans were not successful in doing it, so the people that were running PBP said the Americans had to qualify for 2 years.
2 years.
2 years before you were allowed to do it. So Charlie Lamb, I think that's when he started, right? So he started doing BMD so people could get more experience of doing it. And then
I was told that it was 75. There was a larger group of Americans went over and it was really bad weather. And I'm told that an enormous amount bailed out and the French were furious.
the Americans-
That's where the Bells thing came from. That they bust shots when the Americans came over.
what is this?
I was told it was that
No, I think
One-
it might be before you, I think it was.
I was just told that Charlie said that a contingent of Americans went over and they bailed out because of the bad weather.
It was late.
And then that's why is- and we had to qualify for 2 years.
Wow, because we didn't have to do it.
yeah, and at this point the rides are there's so many people who want to go. You pretty much have to do some of the rides the previous year anyway, just to be able to pre-register to be able to go this year. So the only people that are able to go, this year are those that have done at least a 200K, and that's really they're kind of expanding the field. It was looking like you'd have to have done a 400K or so last year just to be able to.
The way that they set it up is people who did 1,000K last year get to sign up first, and then people who did 600K last year get to go sign up after that, and then so there's like a later and later start dates when you were allowed to start signing up based on what your longest thing was last year. You still have to do the qualifiers this year. And in theory, if there are still slots left by the time you get to people who didn't do anything last year, you could start this year and go, except that it'll be full by then.
Start planning for 2023.
Yeah.